Hi, and welcome to our accounting training video. My name's Andy, and I'm really excited to show you just how you can actually use our system to replace your other accounting software. Now, the reason why this is so important and nice is because it's an all-in-one solution. So this really will make things so much easier since all of your giving records are already in our system. You'll love that you'll be able to simply start your bank imports just like QuickBooks and map everything from there so that your books will be up to date. Plus, you'll love that this fund accounting system so that you'll really be able to track your income and spending for each fund so that you'll know quickly what your balance is for each fund. In this short video, our team will show you the ins and outs of using this great feature. Let's get started.
So what are some of the things we're going to go over in this video? First, we're going to do a little fund accounting overview, just in case some of you are watching this, you're not really sure what the difference is between normal accounting and fund accounting. Then we're going to jump into the software and we're going to talk about setting up your accounts, bank integration, registrars, your journal entries, fund transfers, starting balances, and reports. So we'll get into all this stuff here in just a second. So a quick overview of what fund accounting is and why it's so important. I made this little diagram for you because this really kind of covers it. Let's just say, for example, you've got $500 worth of donations today and you put that in your bank account. Well, what is that money for? For example, is that your general fund, maybe your missions fund, maybe a new buildings fund? Who knows, right? That's what happens. If you just throw it all in the bank account, which most people do, and which is correct, that's what you should do. You don't need a separate bank account for every fund. You just need a good accounting system to keep it separate. So let's say, for example, your accounting software is doing what it's supposed to do, which ours does, which is great. You'll know how much money is set aside for each fund or purpose that you're doing. So that way, if you do a fundraiser for your missions fund and people donate to that, legally you should be tracking that and making sure that that's where you spend the money. So the great thing is when you throw all that money into your bank account and you spend some or add some more, at any given time, you're going to know how much money in that bank account is for your general fund, how much is for your missions fund, and how much is for the new buildings fund. So that's what fund accounting is all about and why it's different than just normal accounting. Also, I just wanted to go over this because we've all heard it and it's always intimidating if you haven't gone to accounting school, but it's assets equals liabilities plus your equity or stockholders equity or whatever that last term might be. And since that's an equation, you can actually move it around. I always like to look at it this way. And some of you may not like this, and some of you may say, hey, that makes sense now. So in accounting, it can get a little more complicated than this because you might have assets like buildings and other stuff like that. But when it comes down to just money, pretty much any money you have in your bank account or your assets in general, which can be other things, minus any money that you owe people, whether it's your credit card or a loan, is how much the organization is worth. Now, in commercial, the worth has a little bit different meaning, right? The shares and everything else. So when you just look at a nonprofit, at the end of the day, right, however much money you have in your bank account that people have donated, minus what you owe to people, which might be temporary stuff on a credit card because you just bought a whole bunch of stuff on your credit card this week, is how much you have. That makes sense. Actually does. However much money you have in your bank account minus what you owe people is what you have. But how do we get money in our bank account and how do we owe people? Well, especially in today's credit card world, Income usually goes into your bank account, and your expenses are usually on your credit card. But either way, at the end of the day, the money comes in as income and it goes out as expenses, and that is also your equity, right? If I have $100 come in and I spend 50, my worth is worth 50. So I just thought that was kind of a fun way to look at things that make it a little more readable to me when I switch this equation around to assets minus liabilities equals your fund balance. All right, so in our accounting software, the very starting point that you should start and kick off getting everything right is the accounts section. So you just go to accounting and then accounts, because accounts is really where you're going to keep track of things. That's going to include your accounts as well as your funds, because I said before this is a fund accounting system. So really make sure that you nail this stuff down. So let's go over this really quick. First, we have a section called assets. Got a section called liabilities, right? So assets and liabilities, I always think of as tangible items, right? Either I have money sitting in my assets, or I have things that I own sitting in my assets. Mostly that's going to be our bank accounts and stuff. Then I have liabilities like loans or credit card debt. And credit card debt doesn't mean like long-term debt. Every month, hopefully you pay it off, but then, you still owe it for the time being until you pay it off. So basically your assets minus anything you owe is your equity. So, which is pretty cool. Anything you have minus what you owe becomes your equity. And then next we've got our income and expenses. Now, those aren't really tangible. We don't hold on to income. We put any income we have into our assets, and any expenses, gets pulled out of our assets or increases our liability, right? So your money's going to either be sitting in an asset. When money comes in, it like comes in through income and goes and sits in your asset. Usually expenses is going to go out through a liability and you still owe your credit card, or they're going to go out through your assets because maybe you just have a debit card and you just pay it off. So that's a good way to think of that. So really, you're always going to be using two accounts every time you do something. And we'll get into that just a little bit with the registrars. But really, if you have income coming in, you got to put that money somewhere, so it usually goes into, say, a checking account. And that's why you'll notice that you're going to be using two accounts for every transaction. I know most of you watching probably already know that, but just to make it clear. Then inside of here, you can create groups, which is really nice. So I've made a bank account group. You can add more. And then inside, I've added some different accounts within there. So I've added my Chase checking account. Inside liabilities, I've got my credit cards group that I made. And then I put my Chase credit card. And then equity, you're going to notice that there's not the ability to create an equity account. I'll explain that in a minute. And then income, you've probably done this, so you can make your different groups. And these groups come in handy in the reports. So for example, like your income statement, it'll break it out by the groups here, which is nice. And then you can add as many accounts inside of each group as you want. And then of course we got expenses. So this way we can track our income and our expenses. Now, why doesn't the software allow you just to create an equity group or an equity account? That's because since it is a fund accounting software, you actually make them up here. You create a fund, and whenever you create a fund, it'll automatically create a matching equity group as well, which is nice. So that way things don't get out of sync. We just want to make sure that things stay in sync for you, which is really important. So that's a quick overview on accounts. Now, for most of us, if you're like me, I don't track my transactions daily. Maybe I do it weekly, and I would never remember because I just rely on my banking to take care of it for me. So that's what we've done. We've done this great banking integration for you. So our bank integration is really cool because it allows you just to download your transactions directly from your bank and credit cards. I mean, that way you don't have to remember, you don't have to go in and manually enter anything. So we use a service called Plaid. You just click connect with Plaid. And so for example, if you have Chase, you type in your bank account's username and password that you would normally log into your bank account with. This, of course, is just a demo system, so then once it connects, it's going to show you all the different accounts that you have. So, for example, there's a checking account over there, and as you can see, this is not linked in our software yet. So I'll be able to come here, and we're going to make that our Chase checking account. There we go, that one's linked, and I know I've got a credit card over here. So I'm going to link that to our Chase credit card. There we go. So now it's all linked up. Then, before we jump into how this works, there's some setup things that you'll want to do to make this even easier. So now we've connected to our bank account, which you saw was very simple, and it automatically downloads those transactions for us, which is great. And then from there, like I said, there's just a setup thing that I want to show you here. And that is in your settings and your purposes. Now, as you know, anybody can donate to different purposes in Continue to Give, or you can do it manually in the CRM donor management part. But let's just say, let's go ahead. I just want to show you something that you're going to want to do. Let's go ahead and edit this purpose. So inside of here, you can set up which income account. So I'm just saying this is just going to go to our general income, and this is our general fund. So there's something I want to make very clear here is that when people donate to you, it goes into your transactions in your donor management. That does not mean that it's in your accounting yet, because you need to manually match this stuff. So, right, because you're probably going to have money going to your bank account, which you need to map to the specific donations. But by setting this up, that'll help. So if every time somebody donates to your main organization, you want that to run through your general income account and your general fund, then you can set that up here. So that'll be really helpful there. And then that way, when you head back over to your bank integrations, there's actually some auto mapping features that happen that are pretty cool. So now that you have your settings set up and you've downloaded your bank transactions, there's some cool things that you can do here, because a lot of the income into your bank account will hopefully be coming from online donations or different batches. So one of the cool things that we've built into here, so let's say for example we're going to do this $500 transaction. It's 8/17. Now, as a lot of you know that when an online donation is made, if like 5 or 6 of them happen on one date, then it usually comes into your bank account on a slightly different date than the day it was actually made. So a really cool thing that we have here is if this deposit into your bank account is donations, you'll be able to link those to the contributions. So we'll just kind of go back a couple days and see if there's any contributions around that time. And then we can click search. And there's a $500 one. So it lets me know I'm looking for $500 worth of stuff. And if I try to click on both of these, it's going to let me know, hey, that doesn't quite add up. So we're going to go with this. Now, one thing here, this didn't autofill because this particular donation wasn't made to a purpose that was all set up as I showed you before. So it's always good to make sure all your purposes are all set up, because had it been, it would have auto mapped it. So for example, I'm just going to put this into the online giving, and we'll put it into the fund, missions fund. So that other setting that I showed you will make sure this automatically maps. Now the great thing is that when you have $500, if that was made up of 10 different donations, you'll be able to find those donations just like this. So that's great, and it'll fill everything in for you, and then you can just save it. So that's great. Now another little tip that I want to show you here is, because we've got our credit card and we've got our bank account. So here's the credit card, the other one was the bank account. Now keep in mind, this is of course just test data from Plaid, so the names that they have on here aren't the greatest. But there's going to be things like your automatic payments, right, on your credit card. So that's great. And normally those are going to come from your checking or savings. I'm not sure if this doesn't show the automatic ones in here, but normally you're going to see 2 transactions, right? One in your checking account and one in your credit card. So how do you handle those dual entries? Well, is what we suggest you do is you can go into either the credit card or the checking when there's those dual entries, and you'd pick one. So let's say we did this one. You would fill it in, but then is what we suggest you do is you split it. And the reason you want to split it is because just because you paid off the credit card doesn't mean that it's all from one particular fund. So again, because this is a fund accounting system, all the accounts might be your checking account that this money came out of, but it's not always going to be the same fund. So we just suggest that you split it up between the different funds so that the fund balances stay the same. And then you go into the other bank account just so you're not adding those transactions twice. Then from the other bank account, you can find the matching transaction and just hide it. So that's a good way just to make sure that you only enter those dual entries when it's in your credit card account as well as your bank account, because you paid off the credit card. And again, make sure you split up that transaction so that your funds stay in sync. All right, and then a lot of things will happen right inside of here, which is great. So you don't have to remember what you spent and everything, you just download your transactions. Now, let's say, for example, you do want to make some transactions manually. You just come over here to registrars, you pick your account, for example, the Chase checking. And for example, well, here was that $500 one. So it's sitting in there. It's all right there for us. We can also create other transactions because maybe not everything came from the bank account. You can do it manually here. Then we also have journal entries, which are great. So here you can add journal entries if you need to do something manually. And our system will make sure your debits and credits stay in sync. So you can just make any journal entries here, which is really nice. And let's say you need to do a fund transfer. So what is a fund transfer? If you remember that picture that I showed you before that showed the bank account and you had some money in general fund, some in missions, so on and so forth. If you've made a mistake and you need to move money around, you can do that with the fund transfer. So this doesn't move money from bank account to bank account. It keeps it within the same account. So for example, inside your Chase checking account, but then you redistribute funds. So you might say like, actually our mission funds does have $100 more than we thought it did, and we're taking that from a different fund. Now, hopefully you're not doing this all the time, but if the need arises, this is where you can do your fund transfers. All right, so we've taken a look at our accounts. We've done our bank integration, which is great because then you can just download and start everything from whatever's in your bank accounts. We've taken a look at your registrar transactions and your journal entries and your fund transfers. And now there's a little something else we should show you, and that's your starting balances. We understand that when you start using this, you're probably not going to go back 20 years in time. So after you download your first set of bank statements, you do as many as you're going to do, then you'll probably want to go to your starting balances to balance everything out. So here you'll just be able to go in, you'll be able to put what your starting balance is in each account by fund, which is really good. So you can just get that all set up right here. Then, once you've started doing everything, no accounting software is complete, of course, without your reports. So we do have CRM reports and accounting reports separate in here. So the great thing is, say for example, I want to look at my income statement. We'll be able to do that right here. We can take a look at this year. And we'll be able to see that our donation income, that group, the online giving, was 1,400, while the general income group and the account in there was $5.40. And then we've had some expenses, some payroll and general expenses, with a total income of $855.30 this year. So great way to keep a pulse on your income and expenses. And then another great thing that you probably really need to do, which other software is not going to do for you, is to know your balance sheet by fund. So this is really important here. Maybe you've got $100 in the bank account, but you're really not sure where that money's supposed to go. You can always look anytime here. It's going to let you know, for example, in the checking account, uh, looks like missions is running a little low. Of course, it's just demos, so it is what it is. I play with these numbers sometimes, but that'll help you know if suddenly you're like, wow, we're spending money in missions that we don't really have, you're going to know it. And this balance sheet's going to become really important to you. So, so that's a great way to take care of that by the balance sheet. And really, that's kind of a wrap on the accounting software. So we've tried to keep it really simple for you. We've taken care of the main stuff, so you don't need to know accounting very well. You just need to know, like, hey, when money comes in my transactions, it's going to go sit somewhere, like my asset, and it either came in or went out, normally through an expense or or income, comes in through income or goes out through expense, and usually going to sit in my bank account or come and go from my credit card. So this is a dual entry fund accounting system. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's setup course. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to customerservice@continuetogive.com. I'd also encourage you to join our support group on Facebook at Continue to Give Active Users. And don't forget to follow us on social media. Thank you so much, and God bless.